Lewis Hamilton, F1 champion facing Abu Dhabi Grand Prix penalty before qualifying. The Mercedes driver is home and dry, having wrapped up the World Drivers' Championship title in Mexico last month. He helped his team take home the Constructors' Honors too by finishing first at last weekend's Brazilian Grand Prix. And Mercedes executive director Toto Wolff revealed post-race that the Brits' power unit was in danger of failing though. Chief strategist James Vowles has now echoed those comments as Mercedes prepare for next week's Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. If we just go back a little bit and look at what happened in the race, after the first pit stop with Lewis, we noticed quite a significant problem, which required a huge amount of input from a number of sources, Vowles said. We have a team back in the UK at Brixworth who work alongside us on the intercom, and we have a huge team trackside working together diligently to understand what we can change on the engine to get to the end of the race. They did a fantastic job. It wasn't one change, it was a huge number of changes across a 40-50 lap period, where they were working with Lewis to adjust various componentry and get that power unit to the end of the race. They did a fantastic job. The engine has sustained some level of damage, but we don't yet understand what. It has to be inspected and understood before we can make any decision going forward to Abu Dhabi. Rules state drivers can only use 2 or 3 power units, depending on the type, per season before incurring a penalty. And because the one Hamilton used in Brazil was his third, he faces dropping down the grid if it has to be changed. The penalty for, in this instance, a third engine change would be 10 grid places. Therefore, Hamilton would have to start in 11th at the if he qualified on pole. Hamilton would then drop down another spot for each place further back he was in qualifying. If Mercedes are forced to change Hamilton's engine and he overcomes the odds to win at the Yas Marina circuit, it will be his 11th race victory of the season. That would put the 33-year-old on 73 career wins, second in the all-time standings to Michael Schumacher. 7-time F1 champion Schumacher came out on top 91 times, with his final victory coming at the 2006 Chinese Grand Prix. Related articles: F1 News, Formula 1 is sick, Sergio Perez aims Fernando Alonso blast. That is the damning verdict of Force India driver Sergio Perez, who says F1 is no longer as attractive as it was when he was younger. Alonso is in the midst of his 18th season behind the wheel at motor racing's top level, having begun his career with Minardi. But he has spent the past 2 years trying his hand at IndyCar and Le Mans respectively after failing to compete at the front of the grid. Alonso will leave altogether after next week's Abu Dhabi Grand Prix as he attempts to complete the Triple Crown. Has now offered his take on what the Spaniard's decision to quit F1 says about the sport. It shows how sick F1 is, Perez said. We have one of the best drivers in the world, he loves racing to the last fiber in his body, and he tortures himself in the midfield weekend after weekend. If we put him in another car, he would fight for victory and be world champion again. That's our Formula 1 and we lose him. And we are all in this boat. We'll compete in China this weekend as he seeks to become world endurance champion with Toyota. And he recently opened up about his motivations for calling time on his spell in F1. What happens now is not the Formula 1 that made me want to be a racing driver, Alonso said. I quit F1 because I think we're a weak show. We talk more about what happens next to the track. We talk about polemics and radio messages. I could write down the first 15 positions for the result of the next race, perhaps with a few changes of places. I find it hard to accept how predictable it has become. I suppose I find more pleasure in other racing series. Alonso will be hoping to go out with a bang at the Yas Marina circuit next Sunday. However, his McLaren has failed to deliver on the promise it showed at the start of the season. And he currently sits 10th in the drivers' standings, 8 points and 2 places further back than Perez.